Yo, welcome back. This is Mefjus once again with Particles. This is our fourth installment, and we're here in the basement studio. And this time we're going to have a look at the track Transit I did with Imanu, who is formerly known as Signal. And we did a little Spotify commentary as well. And if interested in the whole name change thing he did, we had a little chat about that. So check that out on Spotify. But right now in the studio, we're gonna have a look at the Cubase project. This time we're in Cubase 10. Last time I was still in Cubase 8 when we talked about Bubble. So this looks a bit different, but actually quite similar. And so yeah, let's jump right in. This is Mefjus and Imanu, Transit. I begin with a rough overview of what we have here. This is one of the bigger projects, I have to admit. So yeah, I had a quick look before, and I think, yeah, it's a big one. I think I counted like 60 instances of Serum, which is quite ridiculous. You think about that. And what was it? Yeah, it's 62 instances of Serum, which is ridiculous. But you know, it's for a reason, and we'll have a look why that is. And yeah, let's just start with the drums again, like we always do. And again, it's a similar approach as we had it with Bubble and Amber. And it's basically a synthetic kick drum with a sample or you know, some sort of top layer on top of that. So you see similar sort of kick layout, fundamental top layer paired with a little drum break from from Addictive Drums. It's really, really quiet. You can't even hear it. Hang on. I muted it here. Yeah. So that ultimately is our kick. And I don't want to waste too much time on this because for this episode, I think we should have a look at the snare. A lot of people have been asking, yeah, Martin, how do you do your snares? And I want to dedicate this episode for a more detailed look into those snare drums. So here it is. Here's the sound. And you can see it's semi sort of high pitched, got a little sine tone in there and some different noise textures. Let me just play you different layers. So first of all, it does have a Addictive Drums snare layered on top of everything, which is this guy here. I'm going to have a discussion or a little talk about Addictive Drums separately when it comes to the hi-hat and cymbals. It's quite interesting, I think. For now, we just use this as a top sort of layer acoustically. Then we got the fundamental, which is you know, our sine wave. And it already sounds pretty good, as in, you know, the sine wave fundamental of the snare paired with the break. But you can tell it's still not releasing right, you know, it's very abrupt and a bit dirty as well. So that's why we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more layers, and they're really subtle. They don't do a lot. This, for instance, is just a little noise addition I put in there, which gives it, you know, just another little additional sort of character. But when you A-beat, it does make a little bit of a difference. The next layer is just a noise layer. I used Dramatic for that. It's a wicked little tool. It emulates all the classic drum machines, 808, 909, stuff like that. And I think I just used the open hi-hat for that. So you see that snare now extends a little bit further. Very subtle, but it does the job. And another noise layer, I think. Let me have a look at that. Yeah. So The thing is with snares, you know, you see this now and you think, yeah, why does he have like 4 different top layers? Why you don't just use one? As the track progresses, you'll have, when Jonathan was here, we started with the fundamental, the break, and I think one of those top layers. And then you build, you know, the hi-hats around that, and then the bass riff around that. You'll realize, you know, maybe your bass sounds or whatever occupy a lot of top band space, and then you have to compensate your snare and make that louder as well, or you just, you know, turn down the volume of the bass sounds as well. And with this track particularly, if you ever listen, the bass sounds and everything and the hi-hats as well are very harsh and they're very distorted. And that's the reason why every time I went back on this tune and tried to balance the mix or added some new bass sounds, I always felt like the snare became more dull compared to the other stuff. So I added another hi-hat layer and another hi-hat extension to compensate for that. So that's why there's 4 or 5, I think 4 different hi-hat additions, so to speak. And see, this another air layer here. Really, really subtle. Hang on. Yeah, like that. And I think another one even. Okay, that's actually more of a low end or mid-ish tone that sort of gives the snare a little bit more of a mid character to the whole thing. But overall, it's about all the layers coming together and sort of trying to emulate or model a physical snare, even though there's just one actual snare sound in there. You see, even without it, it sounds quite real. Maybe one word to the tone of the snare. That's what I mentioned in the beginning. It's a little sine wave in there, just to give it a little tone. And it's literally, again, another sine wave, enveloped, distorted a little bit, and that's it. You know, ideally you would pick out a sine tone that is sort of in the register of the track, or in the key of the track, or maybe, you know, you can play around. If your track is an F, you put your tone into a G sharp or whatever, so it sounds a bit like a minor third, stuff like that to make it interesting. And yeah, altogether without the tone, the snare would sound quite flat, which is nice as well. So it's a matter of taste. But yeah, ultimately, I think those layers all make sense, and they sort of build the snare the way it is, and I'm really happy with that. And yeah, if there are further questions when it comes to snares, you know, feel free to drop a comment, and I'll try to answer that as well. But that's the basic approach for that. Let's have a look at the hi-hats and overheads for a second there. I think the hi-hat section is actually pretty much muted, unless for this section here. Shaker stuff, pretty basic. The break section is more interesting because I was using Addictive Drums for this, and it's quite essential for the 3rd 16 here. So have a listen to that. So for this section, we tried to merge, sort of literally merge my sounds with Jonathan Imanu's sounds. And you see literally the MIDI files here is coming from Addictive Drums. And when we pause it here, when we gap it out here, Jonathan's break will come in. So that way we sort of made a merged overhead sort of 16 bar loop. I'm really happy how that came together. And now, as I mentioned, with Addictive Drums, big up Excellent Audio for making this amazing drum machine. It comes with a load of samples which sound fantastic, and you can, you know, tune them around. The controls are really simple, or simple-ish, but the variety of sounds you can create from this is just unreal. And it became one of the most important tools for my productions. And in this case, I just wanted to make a drum break that is pretty, you know, without the effects, that sound pretty simple and pretty, you know, like a drum kit. And you have to imagine this is coming directly out of Addictive Drums without any processing. just sounds fantastic, and it sounds so natural, and you have control of, over every parameter, really. So what I did here is I pitched around with the insert plugins. So I gated the break as a start. I think it took out the low end, what I usually do with that. Yep. I compressed it, apparently. Yes, I did that. Subtle compression. Actually, not as subtle. I really ran it in there, actually. You see that? So without that, it wouldn't just be as upfront. That way, I just really tried to get the break, into your face. Ring modulated that, frequency shifted that, and without those two guys, the break would sound quite normal. So the ring shifter in that case and the frequency shifter really crunch up the mix of this drum break. And yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. You have full control about every parameter of what you're doing, and it's just super fun. You can tune every hi-hat, every little shaker can be tuned the way you like it. Fantastic plugin. Big up Excellent Audio, and I will definitely have another specific tutorial about more of their gear, because there's just such a variety of sounds and plugins they do. It's incredible. So more on Excellent Audio in a different separated tutorial. Yeah, so much for the drums. Let me just quickly play the whole break for you one more time, like this. Came together quite nicely, I think. The sonics are quite, really nicely balanced. Really happy with that. Next up would be the musical theme. That's something I mentioned as well in the audio commentary on Spotify. Jonathan, when he was over, he laid down this little riff here. I think it was even that patch, he just made that on the go. And that's sort of the progression. We built everything around then, and just added more stuff. It's literally just multiple layers of serum once again. Sort of built the musical theme. And there's slow automations here, filter coming in, reverbs being dialed in, dialed out. And I think I had one more session with Reactor, which I had to bounce because Reactor was very unstable. And that's sort of another top layer, weirdly modulated, left, right, grain modulation, which is sort of an addition of that. And a very cool plugin you guys should check out is Portal by a company called Output. And yeah, it's great. It just does this amazing grain modulations, reverb, soundscapes. Literally, if you have a really boring sounding pad or whatever, put that Portal plugin on it. Sounds fantastic. Big up Output for that. Great plugin. Yeah, I mean, that's a musical theme. There's not much to tell to that. We'll talk about that. In the breakdown, I just wanted to make an edit of that is super emotional and even more emphasizing the vibe, the sci-fi vibe about this part. And I think it's nice. And then I wanted to combine it with the actual drop on the second part, so it's not as separated. So now everything comes together. And yeah, it works quite nicely, I have to say. And again, here it's just a bunch of serums coming in with different layers. Yeah, different sort of top line, hi-hats alternated. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. And again, you can create those patches with literally just the simplest of waveforms. It's always sines, sawtooth, squares. It's incredible what you can get out of Serum. Amazing plugin as well, as you all know probably by now. Next up is the folder called Samples. That is literally stuff we dragged out of Jonathan's folder when he came over. He had an actual folder prepared with sounds we were allowed to use, and just cut up a few of the sounds. This one distinctive sine wave on the one, little step sounds. all pretty standard. It's not really worth going to that, but big up Jonathan for being prepared as he was. It was amazing. He came with folders of drums, bass sound, samples. It was really cool working with him, just throwing stuff on the page and see what stuck. And yeah, really happy how the process was working with him. So big up Jonathan. And I would say let's jump into the most important part. Folder. It's a bass folder, and it's quite intense. So basically, this bass section is built out of three sort of parts, or two parts, pretty much, which is the bass riff with those resonant sounds on top of it. Let's put them together. Oh shit! Let's put them together here. Yep. And then the answer part, which is always the second bar of the phrase. Like that. So those are the two sort of A-B sections in the song. And let's have a look at the first section. And I was talking about this in the commentary as well. I always try to keep all the sounds as live as possible to have full control over the whole song until the very last stage of the production process. And this is one of those guys. You see everything is still in MIDI here. And the cool thing about working like this is if I'm funny and I say, you know what, this track is I think in D sharp. If I wanted to transpose that into an F, I would just go up to semitones. And it will work, And I'm just really happy that these days with those really powerful computers and plugins we're actually able to do this. Like a couple of years ago, it was a nightmare. You would have to bounce all of that, and then you're very stuck, which is nice as well. It can give you some limitation, but I'm a big fan of keeping everything adjustable and be able to control that. So specifically for the riff, you can see there's a lot of MIDI stuff going on. Basically, it is a couple of actual serum sounds that come together, which create the riff. And there's a lot of MIDI triggers, and those MIDI triggers, they control serum instances as a serum effects. So check out the routing on this. Those sounds all go into a group called sub-nu. Part of those do. So as you can see here, it's just the bass frequencies coming in. Then I routed this into a new bus called sub and stab. Here I would merge the top layer of the sound and the bottom layer of the sound. You can see in the spectrum here, it's already getting more. Putting a sub like a subtle instance of trash on it just to wave shape them a little bit, give them more edge. Then I would use this, route it into another bus. It's called all mid. This is like a global sort of effects insert chain, because other bass sounds will go into this folder as well, into this group as well. So they all have sort of similar effects on it, similar textures, similar attitudes. And this is the serums I was talking about. Like those guys here are triggered by the MIDI files we were looking at down here. So what were they? I think it's either this guy or that guy or that guy, because there's so many automations going on. So if I mute this guy, you see it's doing nothing here. And that is quite essential because I'm automating this low pass filter with quite a bit of drive. So I bring this back in. You can see there's a lot of beef coming up. And that's a very cool way of automating stuff in Cubase. And the thing is, Cubase is very, it's a touch old school when it comes to chain effects, multiple effects and stuff like that. I know Ableton is good with those sort of effect containers, so is Bitwig. With Cubase, it's always a bit of a workaround. But when you get your head around how to route stuff like this, it's actually pretty decent, because I like the fact that I had to sort of put it into multiple stages just for Cubase to work that way. But it really gives you a lot of options to manipulate the sound, because I could now go in and manipulate the sound in this instance, which will make a different which will have a different effect on the sound in this stage or this stage. And so yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's very Cubase specific. But continuing the routing madness here, this bus would go into another stage. I call it second stage here, which is basically one bus I did in the very last step of the production of this tune. You see, it's again this portal sound there. That's very important for the outro. I think I just really delayed everything into some sort of reverb room here. So yeah, that's portal, and the reverb here. Just, you know, literally this automation here, just to have a nice edited version of this for the outro. Some people might ask why I routed it like in 4 different stages. The thing is, with Cubase 10 now I have a lot of inserts, but up until Cubase 10, like one version ago, you only had I think it was 8 inserts. Of those 8 inserts, 6 were pre-fader, 2 were post-fader. That's why when I go into this stage, you see those are the 6 inserts that are pre-fader, and then the next 2 would be post-fader. If I had used Cubase 10 back then, I probably would have got away without this second stage. Yep. But yeah, it was made in Cubase 8. I just opened it here in Cubase 10, so that's the reason why I had to, you know, the multiple routing thing. Yeah, so much for the bass riff. I mean, it is quite complicated. When you look at this, it's quite, you know, convoluted, the whole riff, especially with the you know, answer file here as well, which is a similar approach. I'm not going to go too deep into that. But again, I routed all those guys, the MIDI into buses up here, which is the answer bus here. Similar sort of approach. If I would delete, you know, all the effects, you'd see a lot of the character and a lot of the movement, a lot of the LFO of the sound is missing. By, you know, putting those back in, you see the sound is shaping. And again, those are the serum effects here that are triggered by separate MIDI files. And yeah, they really shape the sound in this track. One thing worth mentioning for those bass sounds, though, is that the whole bass riff really lives from the send effects we applied here as well. So you see, those were the, you know, the groups, the buses we were talking about for the A part, and this here is the B part here in green. And together, you know, they build the riff. But when you have a look at the effects channels, you can see a lot of the tails and a lot of the tones are actually created by send effects. Again, this might be a bit Cubase specific and very specific to how I work, but I'm a big fan of having send effects. And, you know, when you think about it, an insert effect is nice and good, but it will always change your original sound. And if you think about it from an analog, you know, sort of perspective or routing approach, you have your dry signal here and you have your effect rack there, and you can just send your original sound into this effect rack, not touching your original sound, which is great, you know. If you want to put some ridiculous reverb on your send bus, your original sound will still be the same phase, the same, you know, composition, and you can then manipulate the the send effect, which is great, you know, and you don't fuck with your original sound here, which is great. So yeah, that's what I do a lot, you know, and build textures, build weird sort of rooms, build rooms that come from a very narrow field into a wide field, distort that and sidechain that to create some sort of movement into the track. And without that, the song would sound, you know, similar still, but very, very dry. So you see, those little, you know, dialed-in effects are very, very essential for the whole tune and for the whole riff, and build up, like they actually build up risers just by using the send effects. So yeah, I mean, that's the bass section. Might be a bit much to take in, and it's very specific workflow and very specific to Cubase as well. It is what it is, though. And yeah, if you have some follow-up questions about, you know, the routing in Cubase or the sounds themselves here, you know, feel free to drop a comment or tag me or send me a DM on Instagram. I'll try to answer all those questions. And yeah, I mean, you know, we can have a look at the last 2 folders here. It's nothing too special. Little Reese before the drop. It's 2 serums, just, you know, detuned, sort of trying to build a Reese, old school Reese. It's literally just before the drop. I think you'll know the sound here. Sort of sucking into the drop. And the last folder here is like the effects folder, standard stuff, bunch of risers, bunch of bounces from older versions, you know, moments that we really like, little effect moments here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, further infos on the track and how it came together and why we made certain decisions can be heard in our audio commentary on Spotify. Jonathan and I talked about, you know, his change from Signal to Imanu. We talked about our session in the studio, and we talked about why we called it Transit. And that's about it. If you have questions, again, drop a comment, DM me on Instagram. I'll try to answer those questions. And yeah, track is out now. It's Mefjus and Imanu. Track is called Transits on Vision. Particles 4.